When I first launched this channel, I promised that if I ever reached 100,000 subscribers, I would tell the story about the strange circumstances surrounding my dad's death. Today, I am keeping that promise. This is part 1. In episode 2, I will explain how the battle over his estate racked up over $250,000 in legal fees, all sparked by the theft of my dad's dog and my older brother's demand for more money. That $250,000 doesn't even include the $10,000 a Boca Raton, Florida lawyer extorted from me because I refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He was afraid of what I would tell you about him and what he did. Good. He had every reason to be scared because I paid the $10,000 rather than sign that. And now, I am completely free to speak the truth. I hope you listen to part 1 until the very end and share it with others. And I hope that you subscribe to my channel so you can listen to part 2 and any other parts of the story that come after. My goal is to save every single parent and their children from enduring the same misery my dad and I had to. As a bitter irony, on the exact same day that this channel hit 100,000 subscribers, YouTube demonetized all of my channels. That was an error that I have yet, as of the time of this recording, been able to get fixed. So I won't be making a single penny from ads on this video, which means you hopefully won't have to sit through any. However, if you would like to support my research and productions and help me recover from the devastating financial losses that I incurred while trying to save my dad's life and his estate, I have included support links in the description below. And I'm probably going to mention my sponsor at the end of this video. Remember, I am not AI. I'm an actual human, a real narrator, and I'm going to tell you the story of what happened when my father died. Now let's begin our journey. Have you or a family member ever had to care for a loved one after they were transitioned into home care or hospice? Have you ever found yourself suddenly pushed into becoming a full-time caregiver with no warning or training or any real help? I'm asking you because few people realize how suddenly taking on this burden can completely upend your life and leave you devastated. One day, your loved one is managing their symptoms in a hospital. The next, they are sent home or placed in hospice. And you, or someone you know, are suddenly expected to handle the medications, the daily care, and the heavy emotional toll. All of it without any help from nurses or doctors. Or maybe you will have a nurse who will only visit for a few minutes, but probably not at all. And so many families are left feeling overwhelmed, unprepared, and eventually heartbroken, watching someone they love slip away in ways that feel preventable or unnecessarily painful. Based on my experience, dying at home is not the peaceful, natural passing away that is often promised and assumed, and it certainly is not as it's portrayed in the movies. For too many, it's isolating and exhausting. That's exactly what happened with my dad and I. So let me tell you a little bit about him. My dad was among the healthiest people anyone ever knew. My mom and dad met when she was 13 and he was 16. They grew up together on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, along with a whole bunch of mutual friends. She always said she never knew him to be sick. Isn't that amazing? His childhood friends, his parents, his aunts, his uncles, they all said the same thing. My dad never got sick. It was amazing. Do you know anybody like that? It's unbelievable. But as a result, my dad never had to go see a doctor. Ever. Now, he was always a big fan of Jack LaLanne. Remember him? And my dad always ate healthy and exercised, even as a teenager. When I was a kid, I remember seeing tofu floating around in a container. Nobody even knew what tofu was back then. Thankfully, I inherited a lot from my dad, including his eating habits. I honestly can't remember the last time I didn't have a protein shake for breakfast. That's just the way it was growing up with my dad. He took care of himself in order to be healthy and hopefully never have to see a doctor. Until February of 2017, he and I were speaking on the phone, as we did almost every day, and he mentioned that he had some pain in his lower back. He said he got out of bed and he bumped into the dresser really hard, and he felt a sharp pain in his back, and the pain wouldn't go away. My dad never took aspirin or anything like that, and so he just dealt with it. And it must have been pretty bad, because after a few weeks, he amazed everybody by going to a doctor to see why he still had all that pain. Well, they said he had a mass that was probably caused from the injury. They said it was benign, not cancer. Now, as you may know, all tumors are masses, but not all masses are tumors. The doctors were confident that it was harmless. They offered him some pain meds that he didn't take. Because my dad never took pharmaceutical products, he refused to put anything like that in his body. I'm the same way. And so he did what he always did, the sort of things that he learned from Jack LaLanne. He stretched, he took supplements, he swam, he exercised, and his back pain did ease for a while. That summer, one of his best friends, a gentleman he knew since they were kids, who was a lifelong bachelor who never married and had no children or close family, got very ill. It was suspected that he had cancer. His name was Alex. My mom and Alex actually went to kindergarten together, and he and my dad were together all the time. He tried to get Alex to go to the hospital, but he refused to go. My dad even called an ambulance once, but Alex refused treatment and wouldn't go to the hospital. And so he stayed home, and my dad just kept on visiting him. Now, a few months earlier, my dad had been offered a free trip to go to Greece with another one of his childhood friends. I said, "Dad, don't go." I said, "If you leave, Alex is going to die. You're his best friend. You're his family. You can't go." And my dad's like, I know. And it put my dad in a really bad position. But Alex kept saying that he was going to be all right, don't worry about it, go ahead, go to Greece, go have fun, and he'd be there when he returned. And I told my dad, I says, "Please don't go. Don't go." He said, "I don't know what else I can do. Alex won't go to the doctor. We have no idea what's wrong with him. But he does have other friends, and people are going to check up on him. And I'll be back soon, and when I get back, we'll see if we can get him to go to the hospital again." And I said, "All right." I said, "But don't be surprised if something happens to Alex while you're gone." And so my dad went to Greece. And 2 days later, Alex fell in his apartment. He hit his head in the sink in the bathroom, and he died alone on the tiled floor. Sadly, he had no family to handle arrangements, and no one was allowed to go into his apartment. My dad was the only one who had a key, and my dad was in Greece. When my dad called me, he was devastated. He returned back to the U.S. and couldn't seem to get anywhere with Broward County. They wouldn't even give him the body to have a proper funeral. What they do in situations like that is they cremate you and they toss you out to sea. Isn't that crazy? And the apartment complex where Alex lived would not allow my dad to go into Alex's apartment, even though my dad had a key and they knew him and they saw him all the time. That's just the rules. My dad wasn't family and there was no will. Or if there was, it was in the apartment and nobody could get to it. And so the cleaning people went in there and they got everything of any value. And the hundreds or thousands of photos that Alex had just got thrown in the trash. Isn't that crazy? That's the way it is, though. The stress was really taking its toll on my dad, and the back pain returned, and it was worse than before. He visited several hospitals in South Florida, one in Fort Lauderdale, one in Boca Raton. He then went to the Cleveland Clinic in Weston. They all assured him that it was simply a benign mass. It was pressing on his liver a little bit, but nothing serious. They assured him that people live with benign masses all the time. And so my dad went home, and time went on, and he was still in pain. And so he scheduled a follow-up appointment at the Cleveland Clinic in Weston. I asked him when it was, and he told me. And so I immediately booked a flight and I flew down there to surprise him and to find out what was going on for myself. Now, by that time, I had not seen my dad in about a year, though we spoke on the phone all the time. When I saw him, I gotta tell you, he looked much older than he was. He was thinner. He looked exhausted. His hair lost a lot of its color. My dad was always incredibly handsome. People said he looked like Al Pacino. Some people said he looked like Bill Bixby. Either way, he was a good-looking man, and he always looked 20 years younger than he actually was. But this time, when I saw him, he looked 20 years older than he really was. He looked like my grandfather. He was both surprised and happy to see me. With my dad's permission, I spoke privately with the oncologist. I asked him if my dad was dying, and the guy looked at me like I was an idiot. I said, "Well, I mean, you're an oncologist. My dad's got cancer, right?" And he shook his head and he said, "No, he doesn't have cancer." He said he's got a mass. It's benign. Don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about. I said, "Really?" He goes, "Really?" I said, "Okay." I said, "You've done all the tests? He definitely doesn't have cancer?" He goes, "No, your dad doesn't have cancer. He's got a mass." I said, "All right." And I drove my dad home. Now on the way, we stopped at an auto dealership. He needed to finish up the final paperwork to lease a new car. And so we went there and he signed the new paperwork and then we drove his new car home. Now I say this because clearly my dad did not think he was dying. If so, he would not have signed a lease for a new car. Trust me, that's not something my dad would have done. This is important for another part of the story that I'm going to talk about another time. So I got my dad home and I stayed at his house for a few days. Even though he was clearly exhausted, he kept working and staying busy and exercising. And it really didn't seem like anything was seriously wrong beyond the fact that he was tired and in some pain. We assumed that he just needed to get some rest and he would be back in the swing of things soon. So after a while, I flew up to New York City to finish up some work on a new book that I was working on. And the next morning, I called my dad. He didn't answer the phone. I called him again, and again, and again, and he was never answering. I called members of my family. They called him. They couldn't reach him either. I then called one of his neighbors, and would you believe that she refused to go check on him? Because she said, "I don't want to find him. I don't want to be the one to find him." I said, "Find him what?" She goes, "Dead. I don't want to find him dead." I said, "Don't be ridiculous. I was just there yesterday. He's fine. Just go knock on the door." But she wouldn't do it. So I hung up and I called the police. I then booked a flight and I took a cab to LaGuardia. On the way there, I found out that EMS got into the house and my dad was brought to the hospital. I flew down to Fort Lauderdale without knowing anything else. Upon arrival, I went straight to the hospital. And I didn't leave my dad's side for 2 weeks, except to shower. I ate there when I could force myself to eat. I slept there when I could manage to get some sleep. I worked there when I was able to concentrate on getting some work done. The doctors did tests and once again assured us that he wasn't considered terminal. He didn't have cancer. But the doctor did tell me that he was amazed that my dad was alive. They said he was so weak that they honestly don't know how his heart was still working. And so my dad stayed in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And then a doctor came to me and said there was nothing they could do because my dad was not ill. He was just weak. He then told me that he needed to leave the hospital. The insurance company refused to pay for him to be there any longer because there was nothing for the hospital to do. I said, "What are you talking about? He's sick. He needs doctors around him." He said, "That's not how it works. The insurance company won't pay for him to be there anymore." I said, "Well, can't you just send me the bill and we'll pay for him to be here?" He said, "Look, your dad's like a miracle. It's amazing he's still alive, but he seems to be doing better. He's eating. Bring him home. Build up his strength with food and rest." He told me, "If you can bring your dad into my office, unaided, in 3 weeks, that he would do the surgery to remove the mass." I said, "Why don't you just do it right now? Do it now. We're here. Do it." He said, "No, I can't." He said, "Your dad's too weak. He wouldn't survive the surgery." I said, then why the hell didn't anybody suggest this weeks ago or months ago when he was healthy? The doctor didn't answer. He just stared at me and said to put my dad in palliative care. I said, why would I do that if he's not dying? He said, no, palliative care isn't for people dying. He said they have burn units, things like that. He said they help people get better too. It's not about dying. It's not hospice. I turned to my dad. I asked him what he wanted. He said, I just want to go home. I said, all right, I'm going to take you home, but we don't have anything set up. He said, they want you out of here now, tonight. I said, I need to get you a bed and supplies and all kinds of stuff at home. I said, I'm going to need at least a day. At that point, a lady came into the room, and she works for the hospital, and she said that she could arrange for my dad to be taken to a care center in Boca Raton, right off of I-95. And so my dad and I agreed. A little while later, I drove there, and my dad was taken there by ambulance. When I arrived, I found him in a room, in a bed, with the sheets pulled so high up to his neck, I was amazed he could even breathe. And of course, they had a TV blasting a Spanish soap opera. My dad didn't speak Spanish, and he didn't watch soap operas. They probably torture everybody that way. They treat everyone in places like that like warehouse boxes, not like human beings. I told him I was going to stay there all night, and in the morning I would take him home, and I'd get all the equipment there that he needed. At that point, I was exhausted, and I fell asleep in the chair in the corner of the room. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was jolted awake. A few staff members slammed the door open and turned on the lights. I looked up, half awake. They clearly didn't see me. I watched in horror as they pulled the covers and sheets off the bed and then the pillows, causing my dad's head to hit the bed. They then began pulling the covers out from under him. My heart was racing. I stood up and I said, what the hell are you doing? Stop it. Are you guys crazy? Stop it. They were surprised to see me. They said, oh, we just started our shift and we're just changing the sheets. I said, at 2 o'clock in the morning? I said, get the hell out of here. What the hell is wrong with you people? I said, thank goodness I was here to stop you. This is how you treat people in places like this when nobody's around to watch? Apologize to my dad and get the hell out of this room. Well, of course they didn't apologize to him. They just turned and left. That's the kind of trash that works in places like that. They clearly don't care about anyone or anything. If you have a family in a care center right now, or in hospice, God only knows how badly they're treated, and you don't know it because you're not there to watch. And they're probably afraid to tell you, because they're at the mercy of these monsters. Well, as you can imagine, I couldn't fall back asleep, and I stayed up for the rest of the night. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the door flew open again, banging into the wall, and the lights were switched on. Some lady walked in with a clipboard. She walked right over to my dad and started talking to him about breakfast. I stood up and asked her what the hell she was doing. Once again, she didn't expect to see me in the corner. She said she needed to get his breakfast order. I said, this is the worst place I've ever been in my life. What an absolute horror show. I said, put the clipboard down, I'll fill it out. I mean, honestly, what the hell kind of place is this? Once again, this is how your friends and relatives are treated when no one is around. I looked at the clipboard and I was assured of what I already knew. There was no chance in hell I was going to let my dad eat any of that poison. A bunch of garbage to get you to die quicker, probably. I told my dad I was going to go out for a little while and get us some smoothies, and then I would take him home. While I drove, I made a few phone calls to get the bed and the supplies to my dad's house later that day. When I returned and I walked in, I saw that there was a plate next to my dad. It was a piece of Spam meat on white bread. Nobody ordered it. Nobody asked for it. I threw it in the trash. That's the kind of poison they feed people in places like that. And they probably charge the insurance company $50 for breakfast. I started getting my dad's things together, and a Jamaican woman walked in. And she was actually nice. She helped me out, and then she sat down with me to explain how to take care of my dad at home, including how often to give him meds. I said he didn't take any medicine. She said he was going to be given morphine for any pain he may have. I said, well, he's probably not going to take that. She said he should, because it'll make him feel better, and he'll be able to heal faster. No, I don't know anything about morphine. I've never taken it in my life, never looked into it. These are the days before a grok or any of the other things. She told me that there's a lot to do and I should hire a nurse to help me. I told her I didn't know how to do any of that, but I would call the insurance company to find out. She said that won't be easy unless he has special insurance for home care. I asked my dad about that. He said he used to have it, but he canceled it. So she gave me her card with her number on it, and she said if I needed any help to call her. She said that she and her sister could always come by when they weren't working. I thanked her. Honestly, she was the only helpful person I had dealt with at that horrible place. The ambulance actually took my dad home. A bed and a wheelchair arrived soon after. Dealing with the insurance company was a nightmare. No one knew anything. No one was helpful. I was essentially on my own. My dad actually didn't get as much rest as I hoped he would. He was actually lifting weights while in bed. Seriously. And he was walking short distances, not only in his house, but in his neighborhood. And he was eating, which of course is always a good sign. I stayed by his side and I kept bringing him food. I even got him cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory. And things were going well for a few days, but then he began to weaken, gradually at first, and then quickly. I clearly needed a nurse. I needed help, but there wasn't anybody. Friends and family were not any help at all. Nobody was prepared to help. Nobody knew what to do. He needed professional care, but he had none. He needed to be in the hospital, but the insurance wouldn't cover it. I offered to pay for it myself, but at that point, my dad did not want to go anywhere. He said he just wanted to stay home and rest. How do you argue with somebody who wants to stay home? I don't know. I mean, as soon as he got home, he started looking better and acting better. Being at the hospital is really depressing, isn't it? So I sat down with my dad and I said, listen, that doctor wants you in his office in less than 3 weeks. You gotta put on weight. You gotta get stronger. You gotta keep that appointment. He agreed he would do that. I was exhausted. Nobody helped me. I was all alone. And not knowing who else to turn to, I called that Jamaican lady. She showed up about an hour later with her sister. And the tide finally turned a little bit. They sat with my dad, they cheered him up. They then began cleaning the house. One of them went into the kitchen and made dinner for my dad. And then she fed him. And then they helped him change his clothes. They put him in the wheelchair. They shaved him. They brought him outside for a while so he can get some sunshine. And then they put him back in bed. When he fell asleep, one of them said that she would stay and the other one would return in the morning and they would work in shifts. And they did. They took turns taking care of my dad. They talked about how handsome he was. Of course, that made him happy. It made him smile. Those things are important, you know. You want to make people happy. You want to make people smile when they're sick. And let me tell you something, they weren't blowing smoke. My dad had beautiful skin and really beautiful teeth. Either way, he liked them and they liked him. And I was so thankful because nobody was helping me, and finally I had some help. When family and friends would come over, they were horrible. Right in front of my dad, they would talk about how he's dying and he looks awful and how cancer sucks. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Stop talking like this. Get the hell out of here. My mom's sister and her husband used to come over, and one day I caught them going through my dad's wine cabinet, and they asked me if they could take any of the bottles. I said, are you out of your mind? What the hell's wrong with you? And I threw them out too. A couple of my dad's friends came over, and when they left, they actually tried to steal some of his supplements that were unopened. And then another two came over, and they also talked about how terrible cancer was and how it kills people. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. It is a parade of horribles. I guess sometimes people just don't know what to say. And some people aren't equipped to be positive and uplifting. And so they default to negativity. And I just didn't want people like that around my dad. Because I do have the ability to stay positive. Even though at that time it was incredibly difficult. But I was doing everything that I could in order to keep my dad's spirits high. After about a week, my dad was spending more time sleeping than being awake. I don't remember how I did it, but the insurance company finally agreed to send over a nurse. So at the very least I could try to get some sleep and not have to constantly be awake in case there was an emergency. When she arrived, she didn't do anything really. She just sat at the dining room table about 15 feet from my dad. I would ask her if she was going to do anything and she said, no, I'm just here to wait. I said, Wait for what? She said, you know. I said, no, I don't know. She said, I'm just here to wait. I said, okay, you're gonna wait for an emergency? Fine. I assumed that she meant that she was there to wait in case there was an emergency. I sat down in the chair next to my dad's bed, and I fell asleep. At around 2 a.m., his breathing became labored and heavy. It woke me up because it was the most horrible sound I ever heard. It was like a rattling in his chest. I asked for the nurse to come help, and she said that his body was shutting down. I told her to call EMS, but she refused. She said to let him go. It's natural. I looked at her like she was crazy. So I called EMS myself. Less than 10 minutes later, they arrived, they assessed him, and they gently said that there was nothing that they could do without causing him more harm. They said that if they tried to save him, they would probably destroy his ribcage. They advised me to just go sit with him and hold his hand and talk to him, and so I did, and they left. I filled my dad's mind with happy imagery of my childhood and us doing things together. Johnny Mathis music was playing in the background. My dad loved Johnny Mathis. I don't know if my dad could hear the music or not, but Johnny Mathis was singing Wonderful, Wonderful. You know that song, right? My dad opened his eyes. It was the first time his eyes opened in a very long time. He looked right at me, and he smiled. He was happy that I was there. He was so glad that I never left his side. He always knew that he could count on me to be there for him. He looked at me for a long while and then closed his eyes. I was holding his hand and I felt it grow cold. I didn't want to hold his hand any longer because I didn't want to remember what it felt like for his hand to be so cold. I kissed his cheek a few times. His face was already cold. And so as I pulled away, I let go of his hand for the final time. I didn't say anything to the nurse. I didn't even look at her. You know what? She had no business being there. I didn't know her. He didn't know her. She had no business being there. I picked up my dad's dog and I took her to the backyard. I shut the door behind me and I stood on the grass. I held her in my arms as the sun rose, and then I put her down on the grass. She wanted to go inside and be with my dad. She had no idea that she would never see him again. I don't know how much time passed, maybe an hour or 2 or 3, I don't know. I didn't want to go back inside. Would you? How long do you wait? But finally, I knew it was time to go back in. The nurse was gone. My dad was gone. The house was empty. There was just silence. No voices, no footsteps. With the exception of my dad's dog, I was all alone. It all happened so fast. It was like being in a dream. Most of us imagine the gentlest way to pass is to simply fall asleep in our own bed, one day or one night, surrounded by the things and the people we love, drifting off without pain or struggle, and never waking up. That quiet, painless exit is what so many people hope for. But that's not what home care or hospice often brings. It's not the serene, supported passing that we have all been led to believe. Death is not silent and peaceful like it is in the movies. It's something far more difficult. It's harder, a slow, drawn-out decline filled with discomfort, labored breathing, and confusion. The person you love fades in front of you while you feel utterly helpless, stressed beyond words, exhausted from sleepless nights, overwhelmed by decisions you never wanted to make, and heartbroken with no clear path to ease your suffering. You're trying to care for them with whatever limited guidance comes, often feeling like you're doing it all wrong, because no one truly prepares you for the reality. In those final days and hours, a home that once held so much life becomes a place of waiting, of watching, of holding on as best you can as the world falls down around you. And when it's over, the silence rushes in, and you're left standing in an empty home, carrying the tremendous weight of what just happened. And you can't think, and you can't breathe, and your heart feels like it exploded inside of you. My dad deserved a medical team dedicated to his recovery, someone to help him regain his strength and find his footing, and it sure as hell was not me. And someone like me, or you, or friends, or family, or neighbors, we're just not equipped to be able to do this sort of thing. What the hell are doctors and nurses for if not to take care of people? Who the hell sends a sick person home? It says, oh yeah, give them some food, let them get some rest, they'll be fine. Maybe it happens, but more often or not, it doesn't. My dad was patient dumped. That's what they call it, patient dumped, by a hospital, more concerned with insurance cutoffs than human lives. We were completely blindsided. We didn't have the roadmap to navigate a crisis like that. Now look, this was almost a decade ago, as of the time of this recording. There was no AI to consult. There was no digital guide to lean on. There was no human advocate to show us the way. Nobody, nowhere, would help. You're just completely thrown overboard and forced to find your way back to shore, or to drown trying. And so as you can imagine, even now, all these years later, I am haunted by the thought that I missed something, though I may never know if a different choice ever existed, and if it did, what the results would have been. How could anybody know? I only hope that no one that you love, or who loves you, ever has to navigate the cold, silent void that we faced in the final hours of my dad's precious and priceless life. So, what do you think of home care or hospice for a sick relative or friend? Have you ever been in a situation like I was in? If so, how did you handle it? What advice would you give to others who are in this situation now or who might be in the future? If you ever find yourself in my situation, what are you willing to do to care for your loved one? Is bringing somebody home to be cared for there the best idea just because they want to go home? Or should they be in a hospital or some other facility in order for everything to be done to take care of them? Should any relative ever be thrust into a situation like I was in? Is it fair to do that to somebody who is totally unprepared about what to do and can't get any professional help? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Kindly remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I continue on with part 2 of this story. Until next time, I wish you safe travels on all your journeys. Are you having trouble falling asleep or relaxing? Are you looking for all natural supplements to help manage your blood pressure, glucose, or cholesterol? Are you dealing with prostate and other issues? If so, then kindly check out the all-natural supplements at campfireshop.com. They are formulated from ancient remedies. They also have handcrafted soy candles and premium teas. Ordering via the link below helps support my research and productions.